So you've decided to level up your bourbon game, but which one of these two should you buy? Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, it is bourbon time again, and today I'm pitching yet another bourbon against Wild Turkey 101 to determine which of these two you should be buying. And the reason it's between these two is because these are reasonably competitively priced, at least in the UK. The Wild Turkey 101 in the past couple of months has dropped price a bit, so far so that it's currently on offer in some places at mere £25 a bottle. For that, I'll be honest, it is a steal. But if this goes back to normal and these are fairly level pegging, then, well, I think it's a question worth answering. The two bottles in front of me are, of course, Wild Turkey's 101, which is just the 101 proof version of the regular Wild Turkey bourbon. And we've got Elijah Craig's small batch, which is effectively their entry-level whiskey. This one tends to sit at around £45, but I've seen it as low as 35. And at the current time, the Wild Turkey kind of sits at 35 on average, but can dip a bit lower. So if you get a good day, you'll get them both at a similar price, but it is a little bit hit and miss. The Elijah Craig, though, is a touch more expensive and actually comes in at a lower proof. As I said, the 101 is 101 proof, or 50.5% ABV. Meanwhile, the small batch is 94 proof, or 47% ABV. So there's a little difference there. It's not worlds apart. Neither of these are kind of, you know, right down there at 40 flat, but yeah, there is a bit of a difference. There is also a small difference when it comes to the mash bill. Do excuse me, I have to look over here for my notes. But the Wild Turkey 101 comes in at 75% corn, 13% rye and 12% barley. Meanwhile, the Elijah Craig small batch, 78% corn, 10% rye, but also 12% malted barley. So they are pretty similar. The Wild Turkey I would expect to be just a little bit more spicy because of that extra rye content. Meanwhile, the Elijah Craig a bit sweeter, a bit more rich, vanilla, caramelly kind of a thing because of that slight extra bit of corn in there. But they are relatively similar, just not absolutely the same. And just before we crack these open, the reason I wanted to do this comparison is because, well, I reviewed the Elijah Craig not that long ago, and I said, look, it was very nice, got some nice notes out of it. I didn't necessarily understand a lot of people's real affinity for it. I thought it was good, solid, no complaints, worth every bit of the money you're spending on it. But yeah, I don't know, just didn't really enamour me. Meanwhile, the Wild Turkey 101 absolutely has, as many people will know who've been watching this channel for a while. But the same thing happened with the Wild Turkey's big brother, the Rare Breed. I tried that and thought, I'm not really sure this is worth it. Tried them side by side, and all of a sudden started to understand a bit of the hype. So I'm hoping that might happen here today. I'm going to go for a bit of the Elijah Craig first because it is the lower ABV. So let us get into this. That cork makes an excellent sound. I'll tell you what, I'm also going to pour the 101 now. I'll give it a chance just to breathe a little bit before we get into it. Also a good sound. Right then, just to compare them visually, the Elijah Craig is a touch dark. It's a bit more honeyed, a bit more kind of golden syrupy coloured. Meanwhile, the 101's just a touch lighter, basically. That's all it is. There's not a huge amount in it. I think there is a dog hair in my glass, which is unfortunate, but that's what happens when you live with huskies. But I'm sure it won't affect the taste of the whiskey too much. I'll dig that out of there in a moment. But yeah, the Elijah Craig, definitely the deeper, richer liquid. So if that's something that does it for you, then that might be a point in its direction. The aromas are quite sophisticated, I'd say, on the Elijah Craig. It's not instantly sweet, sugary, caramel, vanilla bourbon, actually. It's more sweet oak, maybe a few leather tannins in there. Distinctly quite woody, to be honest, and it's got a deeper, richer, almost bonfire toffee kind of aroma to it. It's smooth, well-rounded, but there's just like there's a bit of prickly heat lingering around in the aromatics there somewhere that just make me think, yeah, it's going to be nice, but maybe not. I feel like there's going to be a sharp edge to it, let me put it that way. Meanwhile, the 101. It is distinctly less full-nosed anyway. As I say, full-bodied, but we're not tasting it. But the nose on it certainly less complex, certainly less of it. A few spicy notes because of that extra rye content, as we said, and there's a slightly medicinal kind of cleansing, slightly kind of the actual spirit itself, you know, that just the pure alcohol hit comes in a bit harsher. It's a funny one, this, because the Elijah Craig actually, on the aroma at least, feels like a more complete, more well-rounded, more, as I said before, sophisticated option. The 101 feels a little bit loose in places, has got this slightly, just, yeah, less sophisticated thing going on about it. And it is sharper, it's definitely got some slightly rougher edges. But as a result, I feel like it's being honest. Whereas the Elijah Craig, I feel like there's something a little bit rough in the background there, but I can't quite put my finger on it, so I'm a little bit more wary about what it's going to be like. But anyway, let's give them a go, shall we? Cheers. The aroma is very true to the taste, to be honest. It's sweet, oaky, woody, more spice actually than I remember. There is definitely a bit of peppery heat in there, and the bit that I think that the bit that makes me slightly disappointed when I try this is because on the nose, there's definitely some kind of leathery, more mature bourbon note in there. It doesn't really come across on the taste. It's nice, it's sweet, it's got all the hallmarks, the caramel, your vanilla, your slightly biscuity thing, but I feel like it dulls off towards the back end, and it's inoffensive, but I don't necessarily think at this point I understand the hype about it, certainly over something like the 101, which, as we already said, is a touch more affordable at this point in time anyway. Let's go into the 101 then. Cheers again. Okay, I'm starting to understand. After just one sip of the 101, it's obvious that their flavour delivery is incredibly different. The Elijah Craig, very much kind of full-bodied up front, and then feels like it tails off quite quickly, and you end up with something there's not no taste on the back end of it, but it just doesn't go anywhere. Meanwhile, the 101 starts off light, sweet, a little bit floral maybe, and it's got this honeyed thing going on right on the tip of the tongue. But then, as you get through it, it builds you up. You get a bit of burnt spice, some slightly more depthy vanilla, fudgy, caramel things going on. But ultimately, its high is never as high as the Elijah Craig. I'm really torn now between these two. I think in terms of the roller coaster that I want a gentle introduction, then a nice peak, and then a kind of a gradual fade off, and the 101 gets that. But its flavours are not as big and rich and kind of interesting as the Elijah Craig. But I think its flavours are more varied, and I think that's why I keep coming back to it. There is a lot going on in this 101, whereas the Elijah Craig just feels like it's focused on a few key flavours. They're done incredibly well, but I just feel like I want a few more. So who should buy which? Well, actually, I'm quite happy I've got both of them, truthfully. That's one option, go and get both. But if you are picking between the two, then, well, if you want to go down that kind of closer to barrel strength route, the 101 is an obvious contender for that. It's not quite there, but it's definitely on its way, and it does have a bigger breadth of bourbon flavours. You are more likely to find something you like in the 101 than you are in the Elijah Craig because, well, as I said, its array of flavours is that much narrower. But at the same time, it's got a load more heat, it's a load more spiky, it's a load more rough around the edges, and if you think you're easily put off by a slightly jarring experience, then actually the Elijah Craig is a great way to go. If you want kind of nice, intense bourbon flavours but without any rough edges at all, then, well, yeah, the Elijah Craig is a pretty safe bet. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, I was going to call it out and say it was by far the sweeter of the two, but actually I don't think it is. But there's just so much more spice, peppery and burn coming from that 101 that it just kind of, for me, balances the sweetness out a little bit, whereas the Elijah Craig's definitely all in that sweeter camp. But yeah, they are both very good bottles, and right now, I'll be honest, if you're not sure, if you can find that 101 at £35, just pop it into Google, it'll come up. I think it's in some supermarkets and on some online retailers. It is an absolute bargain, 25 quid for that. But if not, the Elijah Craig, even if it's at 45 quid, it's definitely worth it. Like, you can tell the quality is there, But its biggest problem, in my mind, at the price point it's at, is this. Eagle Rare 10-year. And I just think, for me, that gives a bit of both sides. It's definitely a lower ABV than both of them, because this is 45%, which is a bit of a put-off for some people. But yeah, I think in the same price point, and even sometimes quite a bit cheaper in the UK, certainly than the Elijah Craig anyway, that one might actually be worth a go as well. But I have covered this in plenty of other videos, so you have to go and dig one of those out to get my notes on that one, because I'm not going to do it today. But maybe, if enough of you want to see it, I will put this head-to-head against the Elijah Craig in another video. Please let me know in the comments below. So there you have it. If you're not afraid of a few rough edges and want to explore some higher proof bourbon, the 101 would be my shout. Meanwhile, if you want something a bit more reserved, a bit more sophisticated, but maybe a little bit safe, then the Elijah Craig is also a cracking option. But that really is all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribed, if you would be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers. Turns out the dog hair was on the outside of the glass.